magnificent, amazing what they've done to their country, that they've built it up out of nothing at all. Very, very, very impressive. And at first, my first 2 or 3 trips there, I was blown away. I thought Chinese are going to take over the world. Until I started going inside the R&D labs over there and looking for innovation. When we looked, we couldn't find it. We found was imitation. The Chinese had built the world's greatest copying machine. That basically the American companies were doing was they were localizing their technologies for the Chinese market. And the Chinese were doing was stealing everything they could and replicating it. That's what we saw in China. This was a big surprise. So despite what I showed you about all those engineering rates and engineering graduation rates and so on, what we realized was that there was no correlation between engineering graduation rates and innovation. So that sort of shatters all the theories that we have here about the key to US competitiveness, graduate more engineers and scientists. If it doesn't matter, then how is it graduating more going to help America? Now, I'll take a side detour. I mean, I'll talk for a couple of minutes about why India is doing this, how it's doing it, because this puzzled me. This really haunted me for a long time. How could I have been so wrong about it? How could I have, because I had predicted the demise of Indian IT. I had literally had to eat my words on that. We found basically was, I mean, look at the data. I mean, despite all those numbers I showed you, like in 2007, India graduated about 220,000 engineers. The nicest estimate that anyone's put together of the Indian education system is that half of the output is unemployable. That's being generous to India. Right? It's probably more like a quarter. The IITs, which get the credit for all of India's success, graduate less than 5,000 engineers a year, which is minuscule. And the majority of those engineers end up joining the investment banks there who are paying a lot of money. They don't become engineers. Right? Country has a weak infrastructure. It looks like it's falling apart. The education system is really, really lousy. Yet, if you look at the hiring patterns. Just in 2007 alone, the top 5 IT companies hired 120,000 engineers. Accenture and IBM added at 14,000 each. I mean, add that up. I mean, the numbers don't compute. Where are these people coming from? India is racing ahead and becoming a global R&D hub. We found basically was that the way they did it was the same way the Japanese became an economic manufacturing power in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That they copied the best practices of American industry and perfected them. Here's what they did. They're just like you do manufacturing, they manufacture talent. This goes into, we looked into different facets of India's success. For example, when you folks graduate, or the older people over here, when you look for another job, what do? You put together a resume, right? What does a resume tell you? It tells you how good you are at putting together a resume, or how good your friends are at helping you put together a resume, or how good mom and dad were at catching the typos on your resume. It doesn't tell you how competent you are. Yet the entire hiring process in America is based on resumes. Right? Talk to any headhunter, talk to any company, talk to any HR director. It's all about having great resumes. But resumes is a bogus piece of paper. It tells you nothing about your competence. It doesn't tell you it doesn't tell you about your potential. It tells you about how good you are at putting the right words on a piece of paper. Right? Indian companies figured that out. Indians are very good at fudging resumes. So Indian companies figured out that if the resume is irrelevant, then we have to meet people. So the way the Indian IT industry recruits people is to put them through batteries of tests, meetings, and so on and so on. In the BPO, business process outsourcing industry, Genpact is the world's largest BPO company. They have set up storefronts in 16 cities. You go to a supermarket, you go to a shopping center, they have a store there. You go inside, they tell you all about the company, you take your family there, they have big screens telling you all about the company. If you're interested in a job, you meet the recruiter just there and then. If no one's asking you for your resume. If you sound like you can communicate and you can be taught, they put you through a 3-month training session. Literally, they have a training center next door. 80% of the people who go through that training end up getting hired by the company. Pretty good. And Genpact is succeeding tremendously. Okay, here in American industry, when you join IBM today, for example, you get a day and a half of orientation. If you joined IBM in the 60s or 70s, you'd get 18 months of training, 9 months of formal training, 9 months of hand-holding, and so on and so on. Join them today, you get a day and a half of orientation, and that's it, you're expected to be productive. And then you have the heads of IBM, and this is the same for the American industry, dumping on the American education system, saying that we're not graduating enough engineers and scientists, and the country's falling behind because the schools are letting them down. They dump on K-12, they dump on everyone except themselves. Well, Indian industry has no one to dump on. The government doesn't listen if you bitch and moan, right? So who are they going to complain to? What they figured out was that they'll have to take responsibility for training themselves. When you join Infosys, for example, and regardless of what your background is, which school you've been at, you go through a 4-month boot camp in the Mysore campus, which is like a magnificent, it makes your university look like a third world country. I mean, just magnificent manicured gardens, every facility you can think of, an amazing training facility that they have over there. 4 months of that, 6 days a week, 14 hours a day, they retrain you in everything you should have known to start with. And if you happen to be an arts and science graduate, which they also hire, you get 7 months of training. And Infosys right now can train 30,000 people at a time. So when you start work, that's when the training starts. Here, again, go back to IBM. IBM has some online training courses, and they boast about their workforce training because employees can do some training in their spare time on their website. Okay. In Indian companies, in the top Indian companies, 1 week of formal training for every employee is mandatory. In some cases, they demand 2 or 3 weeks of formal training every year. That doesn't include the informal component. We don't get that much vacation in America, as these people get formal training. And there are all sorts of other programs. Leaders and as teachers, for example, at Cadence, every employee above the level manager must get 1 to 2 weeks, must spend 1 to 2 weeks a year delivering training to new employees. Can you imagine the CEO of any company here delivering classroom training? It's unheard of. That's standard practice in many companies over there. Anyway, I'm not going to get into much depth over here, but the bottom line is that as a result of this, the attrition rates of Indian industry are actually amongst the lowest in the world. In the media, you read about all the high turnover rates in India. If you look at this, the hard data, this is about half of what it is in the US industry, in the services industry. And as companies started investing more in their people, attrition rates started dropping. What this shows is that by investing in people, you make them more valuable. You increase their billable hours. You increase the rate that you can charge for them. You make them more productive. You increase their skills, and they're able to do higher level work. And attrition goes down. People don't leave for money. They leave because they're at a dead end in their careers. This is a lesson that the Indians learned. And again, it has nothing to do with the common prescriptions for competitiveness. Which government have you heard talking about this? Which politician have you heard talking about any of this? If we were serious about improving America and the American workforce, just like you have maternity leave, you have sick leave and so on, we'd have education leave. Every worker would be allowed to take a week off to go to the community college and complete education in any skill in any area that they wanted. When people got unemployed, rather than just giving them money for nothing, we put them through, we'd require them to go to school and learn some new skills. We're giving them money anyway. We just talked about this 99-week unemployment insurance. Why didn't we make 30 weeks of that contingent upon getting more training? We already have community colleges which are heavily subsidized. We could have taken some of that money and put it into workforce training. Imagine how much the good we would have done by taking 10% of the American population and upping the education level. But no one thinks like that here. Instead, we blame it all on our schools, we blame it all on someone else, and we talk about graduation rates and so on and so on. University research, we keep talking about how we need to do more basic research, but look at the data. We spend nearly $50 billion a year on university research. What do we get out of it? About $2 billion in license revenue. Now that $2 billion is cumulative for the last 50 years of investment. Okay. Now, many of you aren't going to run companies, but if you're running a company and you were investing $50 million a year in R&D and getting $2 million back after 50 years, what would happen to you? You'd be long gone. Right? But this is how the system is here. The entire university research system is busted from a commercialization point of view. It has many other benefits. It educates scholars, it educates the workforce. There are wonderful things that come from our university research system. But the solution to getting more innovation in America, to getting more entrepreneurship in America, getting more companies started up, isn't to throw more money at the universities. They'll just build more buildings. They'll create more labs. They'll have more deans who have more secretaries and have more overhead. You're not going to get innovation out of it. Yet this is the common discourse in America. I mean, rising above the gathering storm, part 1 and part 2, the emphasis again was basic research. put together by academics saying, give us more money. Of course, give us more money, but that's not going to lead to competitiveness. I'm going to take a detour and talk about immigration. I mean, this is another thing I've been researching because my thesis has been that immigrants have contributed disproportionately to American competitiveness. When we studied tech companies started from 1995 to 2005, we did find indeed that they contributed disproportionately, far, far more than I ever imagined. In that time period, during the days of the dot-com boom, the greatest period of economic growth in recent American history, 52.4% of the startups were founded by immigrants, people like me who were born abroad. In 2005 alone, these companies founded by immigrants employed 500,000 workers nearly and produced about $52 billion in revenue. My Indian friends were hyperactive in starting companies. Despite their lousy education, when they came here, they became entrepreneurs. And they were 15.5% of Silicon Valley's companies are founded by Indians, despite the fact that Indians constitute about 6% of the Silicon Valley workforce. How do people like me come to a country like this, to the most, and not only to this country like this, to the most competitive part of America, the fiercest competitive region in America for technology, and outnumber every other group, including the natives, in starting companies? Isn't that amazing? But these are the data. I mean, look at it. And even in terms of patents, Indians and Chinese, despite the fact that Indians and Chinese both constitute less than 1% of the US population, nearly 17% of the patents filed in the United States, the WIPO patents, had Chinese authors and 14% had Indian authors. That's just huge. These are the most important patents that we file in America, the global patents. We looked into the background of immigrant entrepreneurs, and what we found was that there's no magic over here. The fact is that the crowd that we're bringing over here tends to be very highly educated. That the vast majority of them, nearly all of them had bachelor's degrees, the vast majority of them had masters and PhDs, and those masters and PhDs were in STEM-related fields. So, despite anything negative I might say about STEM, the fact is it gives you a huge advantage in entrepreneurship, at least, and in innovation. Now, here's what the problem is. This is something you don't read about much, but there's a massive reverse brain drain going on right now. We brought 1 million skilled workers and their families, 500,000 plus 500,000, in over the last 15 years or so, and we never expanded the number of green cards available for them. Green cards are permanent resident visas. So when you come here on a student visa, and then you typically get an H-1B visa, which allows you to work here. The H-1B visa is valid for up to 6 years. And then in the meantime, you file for a green card, which allows you to stay permanently, which allows you to start companies. The problem is that there are only about 8,400 visas available per year for the people from any one country. Right now, there are about 350 to 400,000 Indians, 8,400 visas available for them. It's the same quota for any country. So the result is that Indians and Chinese are going back in record numbers. Tens of thousands are returning home now, and they're starting companies like you won't believe. Now, in India, 5 years ago when I started researching Indian engineering, when I wanted to meet startups over there, I couldn't find any to meet. The only companies I could go and meet were the big ones, the IT companies and so on. My last trip there about 4 or 5 months ago, I sent one tweet out saying, hey, I'm visiting New Delhi. I want to meet entrepreneurs. And I said I'm going to be at the Oxford Cafe in New Delhi, Cha-Cha Bar. I mean, between the Cha-Cha Bar and the meetings I set up, I met 125 entrepreneurs just on one tweet. Okay. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. There are literally thousands and thousands of companies being started all over India right now in the tech field. And many of them are world-class companies. China was very negative about their innovation as well. Well, that innovation I was looking at was government-sponsored innovation, the big companies, multinationals and so on. You go to China and you meet local entrepreneurs, the kids out of school and the startups, it's the same as India. They're developing world-class companies. Now, in China, I don't have the data, but in India, I actually did a number of samples of startups there. About 40% of the entrepreneurs that I came across happened to be returnees from the United States. In other words, the people we're sending back home. So we keep worrying about innovation, we keep worrying about immigrants taking jobs away, and guess what we're doing? We're sending them all, we're training them over here, we're educating them in American markets, in American culture, giving them training in our best universities, and then we're saying, bye-bye, go and start your company.